Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and this podcast is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts globally. I'm so proud of that. And honestly, it's not because of me. It is because of my truly incredible guests. Excuse me. And I feel immensely fortunate to spend time with people who are at the top of their game, and they are passionate about helping you achieve your goals in both your personal and professional lives. My guests show up here holding nothing back. They are here to share their stories, the secrets of peak performance, and I know that you'll find their insights both inspiring and actionable. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take your life and your business to the next level. Today, I am really pleased to welcome back to the show Gary Turk, also known as the father of spam. Now, this was May 2nd. It was 1978. The internet was in its infancy, and that very early incarnation of what we now identify as the internet was called ARPANET. And the digital equipment company sent an unsolicited commercial email to every ARPANET address on the West Coast. Remember that because that's important. We're going to be talking about Queen Elizabeth II during this conversation. And just like that, email spam was born. Now, the earliest documented spam, although it hadn't been coined as spam yet, was a message advertising the availability of a new model of DEC corporations, Digital Equipment Corporation computers sent by Gary to 393 recipients on ARPANET. So rather than send, and this makes sense, rather than send a separate message to each person, which was the standard practice at the time, he had his assistant write a single mass email. Because as the marketing manager at Digital, he was hoping to get attention, particularly from West Coast customers, for their new series of systems. Instead, he ended up getting crowned, for better or worse, as the father of spam. But I'll tell you, he prefers to think of himself as the father of e-marketing. There's a difference. And in fact, that original spam message did work, according to him. He says we sold $13 or $14 million worth of the DEC machines through that email campaign. But as in anything that works well, on the negative side, complaints started coming in almost immediately. And a few days after the original email, an ARPANET representative called him up, chewed him out, and made him promise to never, never do that again. Gary, good morning. Thank you for joining me today on your Partner in Success Radio, and it's good to have you back on the show.
Good morning, Denise. Good to be talking with you again.
Thank you. You and I are email buddies. We have been for a long time. And the irony of, the father of spam and I chatting back on a regular basis does not escape me, I have to tell you.
Well, you're on my light spam list.
I don't consider it spam. A lot of the stuff you send me, it just cracks me up. And some of it, I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but I don't really respond to it. And other stuff's like, oh, I'm keeping that. So, you're all over the place and you send me some great stuff. So thank you for that. But I do recall, speaking of Queen Elizabeth II, who's, passed away last year. I admit I cried. I cried all day. I cried during her funeral. But I sent you an email that said Queen Elizabeth II was the first head of state to use email in 1976. And that was 2 years before you blew up ARPANET. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes. If I knew she was on it, I would have sent one to her. Oh, no. I didn't have her address. I'm not sure. It was obviously hidden in one of the other ones over there in the United Kingdom.
Sorry, I hope I didn't cough on you. And according to another email that I found, and I just sent it to you about half an hour ago, it was a man called Peter Kirstein who set up her email account using the username HME2, Her Majesty Elizabeth II. Of course it was. And he said all she had to do was press a couple of messages And then here you came along on the American side of the pond.
Yes. The thing about it is that even back then, uh, the ARPANET, which was packet switching, was the new technology, okay, that was underneath it. It was over the Atlantic to England and over the Pacific to Hawaii. So it was already an internet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they did that through satellite connections.
Huh. It's amazing that, and I love that you're here to tell us these stories because we do just kind of point and shoot anymore. We think it's all magic. It's not. Trust me, it's not. And I love to read stories about the very early days of, what you were doing, what ARPANET was doing, what the internet was doing. And I think people don't really understand how it all kind of originated and how it has become what it is now.
Yes, it's very complex now. However, I put together, because people, ask time to time, and I explain part of it. I have put together a presentation. I like to call it edutainment, that goes back and explains it so that everyday person on the street can understand it, how it evolved and what the technology is.
Gary, where
Also,
can we find that? You sent me an email about it, but there weren't any links, and I meant to get back and say, how do I find this?
I have never published.
Oh, well, we'll talk.
I keep it outlined. I give it because I haven't written a script. It's something I developed a long time ago. Is that if I'm going to give a talk, I just have bullets or part of a presentation to go off of, and then I talk off of that.
Okay, well, I want it, so you need to send it to me. I'm demanding. You're my friend. I can yell at you.
I can. I'll Zoom it to you sometime.
Perfect. That would be terrific.
We'll set that up.
Okay, well, let me get out of your way and you talk about what happened then and what you're seeing now and where you were in all of this.
Yeah. What happened? It all started back in 77. I'm pretty sure it was in 77. I went to DEC in September of 75. And might have been late 67, 76. The vice president of our large system computer group in DEC stopped me in the hall and said that I should check into ARPA, because years ago we did a lot of business with them, but we haven't done any business in a long time, in years. And he wanted me to check it out and see what's available there. So I started looking into that. I briefly remember hearing about them, but when I was in the Navy as a naval officer at the computer center. But other than seeing a classified film once they produced, I wasn't that familiar with them. So I had to kind of like hunt them down and made arrangements. Went down my boss and division manager to DC, and we went and visited them and found out what they were doing, what and where, and developed a relationship with them. So I started calling on the different ARPANET users. So these were the sites within the research community of both the DoD and the university and a few contractors that had on-site ARPANET connections. The IMPs and the TIPs is what they were called. So today we just have a modem in the home. We have backup modems in the businesses, schools, etc. Back then you had a large system to do this. And they were just developing the packet switching technology, which made it very high reliable. And it was pretty easy to visit the customers on the East Coast because they were tightly connected, both around Boston and around Washington, D.C., and a few other spots. But on the West Coast, they were spread out, from Utah to Washington to Northern California and Southern California. And even in those areas, they were well spread out. So after a trip to the West Coast and visiting some of them back on the airplane, it dawned on me that after understanding what these people went through, to be able to put a computer working on the ARPANET, they had to develop their own code. They had to make their own electronic interface to the new communication lines that were being used for this. People might find this hard to believe back then, but this was the ARPANET was being used over a 52 kbit kilobit lines. 50 kb was for the data, and that doesn't sound like much today.
It doesn't at all.
Back then, most people were using 300, 1200, and 2400 baud modems. So, I mean, you could see the characters come and go back then, okay, when you were doing it. But
almost like watching a teletype, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I came up with this idea, and I approached our vice president, and this is probably a good 6 months after he first asked me, and he said, I want you to do a business plan for that. Tell me exactly how much minimum we're going to sell before we make any decisions. I said, okay. He said, keep it to one page. That I like. So I did some work on studying it, and I said, I'll guarantee we can sell at least 12 of these.
12?
12. Now, hang on.
Fired for that today.
No, hang on. The average price was $1 million.
Okay, never mind. I take it back. I was wrong.
Well, over time, the price came down. Computer prices came down. So you could get a good viable system over time for a 2060T and the 2080Ts in the range of 600 to 800K. They really got cheap. So over the life of the product, we sold somewhere between 40 and 50 systems.
Goodness.
And they kept selling those. Okay. That was a big decision. And literally the option put it on either the DEC System 20s or the DEC System 1090 was an additional 50K. That was for the software and the hardware. And they were glad to have it, customers out there. And one of our customers had 4 DEC System 10s, and he was glad to have the new one with it built in. Then we bought a 2060 after that with it built in.
Okay, you faded away. Can you repeat that?
Oh, yeah. The one customer who had 4 systems, think of it as a data center today, okay? There were several data centers on the ARPANET, and they ran services for the other people out there. And he got one of the 1090Ts, and over time he got another 2060T, which was the newer, more compact one, even though he was used to the bigger one with the 7-foot high cabinets with the blinking lights all over it. So nippy.
Well, we've all seen those, and nobody believes they happened, but they were real.
Oh, absolutely. And the good techs, they would walk in the room and they would look at the lights on the different cabinets and know what was working wrong, right or wrong. But when that went away, it became developed a new skill to monitor what was happening with the computer.
Well, I bet. So, Gary, and I wanted to go back just a minute. You mentioned packets, and listen, I learned about them when I went to college and got my degree. Nobody talks about packets anymore.
I know. But
Well,
that's how
yeah,
the internet works.
exactly. So let's talk about those, because there was a time when if you didn't understand packets, you couldn't get a website launched.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah. So the packet's a very simple concept. Think of it just like instead of a packet, think of it as an envelope. Your data is inside, and it also contains error correction codes and all the information about how long it is, and all that. And then it also has on it a an address to and an address from. And the packet, it could be, let's say, a packet of 5. Send what you're sending when you're sending a file to somebody or a large document. The packets would be sent sequentially, but they may not arrive sequentially because of heavy traffic or someone with a backhoe that dug up a communication line.
That still happens, by the way.
Yes, yeah, I watched one do it in front of my house one day. Really, really not happy.
No, no.
Oh,
I had something similar happen here. That AT&T box or communicate, I don't know what it is. It's a big ugly thing, sits between my yard and the neighbors, and it never has worked. And I think they, put it to sleep at some point because, they're using something entirely different for this neighborhood now. And all of a sudden I hear crunch, 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 and they're out there and they're digging up my bushes. I went out and had a screaming fit. As much as I can scream, my voice is a bit too soft for that, but I can use my words very, in a pungent kind of a manner. And they stopped. They said, well, we need to do this. I said, that's fine, but why didn't you knock on the door and ask me what to do about my shrubbery? Because they just whacked it all down. I had a fit. I really did. Yeah.
Yep.
So, the door's right there. Knock on it the next time you're going to do some damage to my yard.
Yep. I had
Whether they will or not, I don't know. But I had it was fun having a fit.
the other end of that with the same thing. Guy came by to cut off service to a house on the next street, and the box between my house and the neighbors was the distribution for, I don't know, like eight houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't properly labeled, and he cut the one, walked away. Well, he cut the one to my house.
Did you have a fit? I would have. See, I'm having
Oh
a
yeah,
fit for you.
absolutely. It just died, that isn't normal to just die like that.
Yeah, I don't normally have little hissy fits, but when I do, they're epic. And this one was epic. And I made them stop, and I made them bring over a boss guy who immediately determined that what they were doing was damage. It was, I mean, he said, you guys didn't need to do that. You could have just tied some of that back. And I chimed in. I said, I have a rope. All you had to do was knock on the damn door. And they're all hanging their heads, and I'm still not, I'm still, this is 2 or 3 years ago. I'm still mad about it.
I don't blame you.
I hold a grudge, just so you know.
Certain things, from a distance.
Don't mess with my plants. Just those are two things that are, leave them alone.
Like I like to say, from a distance, you can't tell the difference between lazy and stupid.
Yeah, well, you get up close and personal with them, and you can tell right away.
That's the only way.
I know. But, when we're talking about packets, and you said something really important, that they're not sequential. They weren't sequential, and they could arrive or not arrive. We still have the same issue with email now. I just got an email before I jumped on with you. And somebody said, listen, I sent this to you 3 months ago. I never got it. I did a quick search. It never arrived.
Yep. You have to check on that stuff.
You do.
Because the network is, think of it as a spider web. And then think of it as 12 spider webs that are all interlaid on each other, different angle. And things just get lost.
They do. And, there's no point in having hysterics over it unless they're lying to you, which also does happen. But I couldn't find it anywhere. And I did a deep dive for it. So, it got sent again. And this time I said, okay, this time I got it. And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't anything critical or important, but he was upset that I wasn't responding to him. And he had every right to be upset, except I didn't get it. So once we got that sorted out, it was okay. But what are you seeing, Gary, I mean, you've been looking at all of this for a long time. What are you seeing, the good, the bad, and the ugly with the internet these days?
Well, it's you got to look at the internet the same way you look at the interstate highway system, right? It's there for everybody to use, but you still have accidents and problems and crime and other troubles that happen on it. It's not because of the internet, it's because of the use and abuse of it.
Yeah. And, and I mentioned this earlier, people think it's magic. Listen, I do too. I develop websites and I know better. I build websites. I build them in my sleep. I think in code. I'm a nerd in stilettos. And by golly, I still think the internet is magic. But, and I'll tell everybody who will listen, it was made for me. It's mine, y'all. I'll share it with you, but it's mine. It's not. But I'm on it so much, it might as well be mine. But I'm telling you, there's something so magical about the internet and how we can communicate now. So let's not abuse it, okay? Let's just
No, agree. I have
take
some
good
friends
care of it.
that remember way back when, okay? And they said the ARPANET was all better because they controlled who got to use it.
Oh,
It wasn't available to everybody.
did it ever become available to everybody, or did it just natively navigate over to the internet and become something different?
No, it became in the early 80s, the mid 80s is when it became available commercially and available to everybody. That's when it was. There was an official point. It wasn't really an announcement, but in my presentation, I point out you can see exactly when that happened and it became open. That's what they call it. Became open, and they renamed it the internet.
When was this?
80. It's in my slides. About 84, about 1984.
That sounds about right. That's when I'm one of those early idiots that bought a very early computer. I mean, it didn't go anywhere, but I had to have it. I just knew that I was going to make a living on the internet before I knew there was an internet. Sometimes you just know where you're going to go.
Yeah.
And I bought this $3,000. I still clench up when I realize how much I spent. And I had to, it was like on layaway. I couldn't get it until I paid for it. And it was a computer and it was a keyboard and it was a bunch of MS DOS manuals, which I still have in my closet because
Oh,
I
good.
paid for those. God darn it. They're mine. I'm not throwing them away. And, I can still speak a little MS DOS, but I'm telling you what it was, Gary. It was a very expensive boat anchor. It didn't do a darn thing. It was a word processor. That was it.
Yeah.
It was
And I
mine,
had
Ollie.
I had a word processor at home. I loved it because I didn't have any maintenance to do with it. It's
There you
nice,
go.
straightforward. But prior to that, back when I was still in New England, I brought home a micro uh, LSI 11, a PDP 11 from work that was a certain model that we had a bunch of inventory and they weren't moving. It was a special packaging. It was left over. And
Are those the ones that wound up on eBay and nobody knew what the heck they were?
well, it could have, but eBay wasn't around then. This was back in about 1982, 83.
Right. I remember seeing
And
something
it,
where an eBay, somebody had found a warehouse that had about 25 or 40 of these. It was a small number. And they wound up on eBay and people were saying, well, what are they?
oh, you know what? I think those are Unix boxes.
Oh, maybe
I
so.
remember seeing that. Those were Unix boxes,
Could be.
and I
Yeah.
believe they're left over from a failed project for the military.
Okay, gotcha.
And what they should have done is given them to some school, like
Oh,
Rensselaer,
yeah,
some technician.
right. Now
Yeah,
they
let the
belong in
students have them.
museums, but
Yeah.
half of my closet belongs in a museum from what I can say. Because the technology just goes and grows so fast that we can't keep up. I've got a BlackBerry phone in there that I don't know why I'm hanging on to it. I hated it when it worked.
So hang on to some of that stuff because I
Oh,
wish I
I
had
am.
some of that old hardware that got lost and stolen or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish I still had it. I actually had a memory plane of core from a early UNIVAC, first generation computer, and that got mislaid. I should be
So
nicer
somebody
about
hauled
it.
off with it, I
Right,
guess.
right, yeah.
Too
So
bad.
yeah, yeah, and a couple other circuits and that kind of stuff. But so I brought that PDP-11 home and showed my boys it, and it had on it the only thing it had. Well, it had the basic operating system and compilers, and that the only application on it had Warp on it, which was the original Dungeons and Dragons.
You're
So
kidding.
no, I'm not. And it was, and it's all in text only
What?
text. It had a screen, only text,
How did that
and
even work?
oh, actually, it was very good. It was like a mystery novel where you had to guess what the answer was before you could go to the next page. Think of it that
Oh.
way.
Well, see,
So
I've never played any online games, but and I think Dungeon Dragons is a bunch of drunk frat boys on a table.
yeah,
I don't know, but I've
that's a
never,
later stage.
I've never had anything to do with it. But who hasn't heard of Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah. So they were down the street, and their friend down the street had one of these computers like you bought. Okay. And
I'm still
he said,
so
"Oh
embarrassed.
yeah, we're running this on our computer at home." And he said, "Well, how much memory do you have?" And they said, "Well, we got 64 megabits, 64 kilobits." And the guy said, "No, you mean eight or six?" He says, "No, 64." He says, "Computers don't have that much memory." So that's why he couldn't do anything on those little old ones. They had no memory.
They did not, and we couldn't. If we, I wrote a lot on mine. I was just fascinated with it, but I couldn't do anything with it. We didn't have any apps. We didn't have Word. We couldn't print the darn thing. I don't even know if I got rid of it, but I wish I'd kept it because I'd like to be able to go back into it and see what I was thinking back in the day. It was
Oh
probably a
yeah.
journal of my life, and I didn't even recognize that.
Back when I was in the Navy, I started out as an analyst and systems programmer in the systems office. And we were developing drivers back then. So, because we had our own operating system on our computers, and we had 5 CDC computers all hooked together. And there were 3 small and 2 large. And we used one of the small ones as the operating system for all the computers and peripherals that were shared as they were assigned to jobs, assigned resources to jobs. And we were, by drivers, I mean things like printers, plotters, uh, tape drive handling, because otherwise you had to write all of that back then into your program.
And I know you and I have talked before about, a lot of what we are working with now came from the Navy and came from, places that we wouldn't necessarily think they would come from. We just thought, again, it was magic and some company did it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
but the Navy had an awful lot to do with how we are wandering through the internet these days.
Oh, yeah. And the Air Force.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, both of them. Oh, yeah. And and some of the contractors out there, like SRI, back when I was bringing out the T series, um, they they were working on the packet switching radio connections on a moving vehicle, and what how you reestablish after it goes through, let's say, a tunnel, and you lose connection, then you have to reestablish and start over and continue where you were. The average person today would think is like, okay, I'm on a cell phone talking to somebody, and I go in a tunnel under the bridge, like in Boston, to get to the airport, and I get on the other end. Then you have to reestablish. The system has to reestablish you back with whoever you were talking with. find you, refine them, and put the connection back together. They were working on that back then.
And, while we're talking about that, not so long ago in July, we had the anniversary of the moon landing, which was in 1969. I am still not sure how they were managing to talk with the astronauts before we even had internet.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that was standard radio stuff. I stayed up all night to see that. Okay. But they had the very big dishes, not the 3 meter stuff, but the 30 feet across and 50 and 60 feet across dishes. And they could only talk to them when they were in front of the moon and not behind the moon.
Oh.
And there was I want to say a 60-second delay between you sending it and they receive it and you get an answer back.
Well, I can imagine, because I've heard some of those and you hear static, 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 and you think, well, they're dead. They're not coming back. And then all of a sudden you hear, one of the astronauts talking to you. I didn't realize that was radio. That makes sense. I had no idea.
That was radio, just like cell phones are radio.
Yeah, and people think that cell phones are cell phones. They're not. They're just a block with a bunch of apps on it.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting. So when you said you watched the moon landing, which I have always been fascinated with, and I'm assuming that NASA has had again, the Navy and the Air Force, an awful lot to do with how we communicate today. But what did you see when you were watching that made you just say, oh my God, what are your memories of that time?
Oh, it was in black and white, and we stood there waiting for him to open the door and waiting for him to get down and then see him step down. It was almost a little hop or jump, and the dust come up. And then you watched him walk away, and the other guy got down. And they're taking, pictures of each other. Just couldn't leave the TV. Just couldn't leave the TV at all. Okay, so what's one of the things that I thought of, and it was right after that. Okay, no, it was about 4 or 5 years after. We talk about technology and how it changes and all that, but people don't realize that the speed and the effect on their lives. Because my grandmother died. My one grandmother died about 5, 6 years after. And I remember
the moon landing.
Yeah, after the moon.
Okay.
So she was born in 1880 something, and in her lifetime, talk about change. In her lifetime, she saw running water come into the house. Later on, electricity, bathrooms come into the house, electric lights come into the house. Radio was introduced. Cars became common. Airplanes came around. There was radio and TV. And she watched a man walk on the moon in her lifetime.
That is a huge gap.
Oh, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Writing, my great grandmother wrote, she always told this story that she and her family rode across most of the United States in a covered wagon. And she was so proud that she was, telling the horse where to go. Well, she was in a line of covered wagons, so the horse was going to follow the tail in front of her. But she told that story, especially as, light dementia. We didn't call it dementia. I don't think it was. I think she just got very forgetful. And she would tell that story over and over again. And, I'm so upset now that I didn't find a recorder and record it. My mom used to get very irritated and say, oh, geez, not this one again. I'm like, really, Grandma? I could listen to that all day long because it was history. It was her history. It was a long history like your grandma. And we're never going to see the likes of that again.
That's right. That's right. And people really don't appreciate that.
No, I don't think they do. Listen, you'll be in the grocery store and, people are, I hate it when people talk on their phone in public. I just, I want to put it on speaker so we can all argue with the ass. Come on, I actually have said that in the grocery store, but people, I'm worried now that people are going to wind up, and young people are going to wind up with what we call a dowager's hump, that hump neck, that
Oh
crooked,
yeah, absolutely. They walk
because
around like that. Yeah.
they're bowed over. I mean, I watch kids get out of the school bus in front of my house. They're not talking. They're bent over, looking at their phones. We're losing to some degree because of all the, in many, many ways, great strides we've taken. But I think we're losing touch with our humanity.
That's yeah. The world is changing right under us,
It is.
and
And it's not always great.
right.
Sometimes
That's right.
it's
Look
fantastic.
at
And other times you're like, oh, geez, what the heck was that?
look at the history we have of the world. Right, the good times, bad times, good times, bad times. Just goes on.
It does. And I think, I mean, I'm glad you shared that story about your grandma. That's fantastic. So she didn't know. I'm guessing she passed before you became the father of spam.
Well, I wasn't exposed, until this century.
Uh, Seriously? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was an article in PC World magazine, and we're at work, and one of the guys from work I knew his parents, and his parents and I were friends from years before that, and he came by, and he's got a magazine in his hands folded over. I can't really see what it is. He said, "So, were you involved with the ARPANET?" I said, "Yeah," and did you have a whatever? And he asked me a bunch of questions, and
I
I
wanted to
said,
make sure it was you.
"Yeah, yeah." And I'm saying, "What are you reading?" He says, "Oh, what's an article here? It says you said this. It said you sent the first spam." And I looked at him. I said, "Let me see that."
Really? Did you have to hide under your desk for a while after that?
Oh no, no, no! I became a bigger celebrity than ever.
When you and I first met, and I don't know how long ago, it's been a while. And I remember, and I'm fascinated with computers and the internet and history. And I went, oh, tell me everything. Just tell me everything. Don't leave out anything. So,
Well, to go back to what we're talking about a minute ago, okay? I found that the grandchildren are interested. Your kids are never interested, but the grandchildren are always interested. It's kind of a multi-generational hop.
well, that makes sense. I mean, when I growing up with my parents, I kept thinking, how do I get away? How do I get away? They're
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I want to do my own thing.
Yeah, I love my grandma. Well, one of them I really couldn't stand from the very beginning. I just didn't like her, which is not nice to say, but she was a very difficult woman. But my other grandmother, I just adored. Oddly enough, my mom didn't like her. And I didn't really like my mom, when I was growing up. So I get it. I understand.
Oh,
No,
my
I
mom used, my mom
anything
used
to
to
have her
say,
back, but it's what it is.
yes, yeah. My mom used to say about my one grandma I was close to, the one I was talking about. Okay, uh, she, she could not understand why she liked me so much.
Families really should be put in the closet and only brought out at Christmas. I mean,
That's kind of the way we worked it actually.
yeah.
One
Thanksgiving,
at thanks,
fine.
one family Thanksgiving, one family Christmas.
There you go. Too funny. Okay, so what is it that you're finding that people want to know now? Because I mean, this is history. And I was thinking before we got on the call, and I love chatting with you because you are a part of living history.
Um, they they they're they're interested in the details of something right in front of them.
I
It's
know.
like
Give me
it's
some
like I
examples.
don't care how the car is built, how it works. I just want to drive it. Same thing with the cell phones. Now the cell phone is the real personal computer, not that thing sitting on the desk.
Right.
But the cell phone is the real personal computer now, and that just has become part of their life. You take it away, they go crazy.
They really do. And I've been on computers practically all of my life. And my cell phone, I turn it off. I let my cat sit on it. If I have to unearth it, I have to scoot a cat out of the way. I don't give out my cell phone number. In fact, I just posted something on Facebook the other day. I said, listen, if you want me to go to your webinar or attend something, and I get partway through your form, your sign up form, and you insist on my cell phone number, I'm gone. You're not getting it. I
Yeah,
don't spam. There are about 6 or 7 people in the world who have my cell phone number. That's it. I
that's what you have to
believe it.
do.
Yeah. And, 2 years ago now, I'd had the same phone number for a long, long time. And all of a sudden, people wanted to sell me, what is it, the car warranty or whatever. I was getting nothing but spam. So I just said, okay. And I changed my phone number. And it's been fine for a couple of years. I'll give it another 3 or 4 before they find me again. But you're not going to reach me on cell phone. It's forbidden. I've got a phone number. I've got a toll-free number. I've got email. You can find me. I'm not difficult to find, but don't even think I'm going to let you chat at me when I'm working or sleeping or any other time. I keep it very, very personal. And I'll be honest with you, I wish more people would.
Yeah,
I
that would
really
be
do.
good.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And a lot of people who didn't
go
grow up
ahead.
using computers like we did, okay, today, they have a cell phone and they really don't use what we call a PC, a desktop computer.
Right, right. Well,
Uh, the
office,
kind
I
of the in
mean,
between land is the tablet,
yeah. I mean,
and
I'm
some of
using
them
my
find
giant.
that. I think that's a good device for a lot of people.
I don't think small children should have them.
Oh no, me either.
Geez.
I'm thinking adults.
Yeah, yeah, but everybody seems to have them. And if I'm leaving the house, my phone goes with me. I do spend a lot of time on my iPads. I have 2 very large iPads, and I use those as a mini computer. My phone, not going to happen. Never
No.
going to happen. And I've started to interrupt you a minute ago, but I'm sitting at my desk and I've got a giant curved monitor, and this is where I do my work. I need to have a keyboard. I need to be able to see multiple monitors. That's just how my brain works. But then,
Yes,
I meet people from everywhere that they do everything on their cell phone. I had a client the other day, his cell phone got lost or stolen. He is lost. He can't get into anything. We've been talking about how to get him, he's in what he calls Apple purgatory. It's taken him 2 weeks to get it kind of sort of sorted out.
that's the problem.
I know. We depend, I say we, I don't, but as a human beings, we're depending way too much on something that fits in our hand and that can be lost. It can be stolen. It can be dropped in the toilet. That happens a lot, apparently. Yeah, it's just, it seems to me you should take better care of having everything in your hand. It's
That's
dangerous.
right. Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
What are
There's
you
just way
seeing?
too much of that.
It is. And, and I had a chat with him. I said, listen, you're going to need this, that, and the other. You need to go back. Once they verify you and you've got your phone number back, and you're going to have to change every single password you ever thought you had. Oh, well, they told me because it was password protected. I said, change every single. I said it very slowly. Are you listening to me? Can you hear me now? He said, yes, ma'am.
I I tell some of my friends, even that work with computers, but weren't computer oriented like me, okay? And I'm not a guru, technical guru, okay? I'm much more of a man machine interface and systems level person. And I tell them, I said, you got to do this. You can't do that if you're doing. You got to. And then later on, they're like, oh yeah, someone stole all my stuff, and
Yeah, you
someone
think?
got in. And I said, and
I
you're still putting your name on the email address, and you're
right.
doing this, and And I told
And
you,
you're not
well,
using a VPN, which is critical these days. You need VPN. There are just so many things that you need to. You can't just pick up that phone, take it out of the box, charge it up, and go, woohoo. That is not the end of it. That's the beginning.
that's right. VPN? We had that on our VAX computer DECnet back in the 80s.
I wanted to ask you about that. I figured you had to
80s.
some way
Yes.
to protect it.
Yes. And it's not the most secure thing in the world, but it's just such a basic step, okay, for communications.
It really is.
Data
Let's
communications.
tell people who may not know what the heck we're talking about. What is VPN and why do you need it? I have it on all of my devices.
Okay. Virtual private network is what it stands for. And what it does is let's say you and I are going to set up some business stuff, okay? Not our casual. Okay, and we're going to be sending what we consider confidential information. We would use the VPN, and the VPN, when my address and your address, whenever they talk to each other, they would set up a proxy, name and number on either side, so that when the messages go by, it doesn't look like it's from you and me. And every time we get on, it sets up a new proxy.
It's not difficult to do, y'all.
It's not complicated at all.
No, it's do a Google search for VPN. You might pay a little bit for one, or you might be able to get it free through your internet provider. Do it. Do it today. Make sure that you have VPN installed on your mobile, on your iPad, on your desktop. Just do it. Do it today. I'm telling you, just do it today. Protect. And you're right. Nothing is foolproof, but it's better than nothing.
Yep. And these people that have Wi-Fi's in the house, so many of them, right? Oh, it's so easy. Just use Wi-Fi. Well, and they don't bother to set up a security code.
I know.
And anybody has access to everything just by driving by.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Especially if you're on your cell phone and you're in a parking lot of some place. Let's say you're Pizza Village. I don't know where you're at, and you're using their Wi-Fi because it works out there in your car. You just gave away a whole lot of information to anybody else in the next car. Just stop doing that. Use a VPN.
Yep.
Anyway, what else do you see that? Because I mean, you've been watching this for a long time. What are you seeing? Let's go with good. What are you seeing right now with the internet that is very good from your perspective?
Well, what it's allowed, and this is what we were doing way back then, is the collaboration of different people working in different areas. And one of the things that is really starting to come out now, even though early versions of the tools were available back, let's say in the early 90s, is in the medical field. The medical field has really was dragging its heels to adopt technology to better solve problems and understand diseases, people's medical problems.
Right.
I'll give you a very simple, an old and very simple example is okay, or they're doing a mammogram, or they're doing a CAT scan. Okay, if you use the tools available, and there's so many tools available now, basic engines to do it, to do the basic scan and to look and discover what's wrong, what's an anomaly, what doesn't belong there before the technician decides if it should be looked at or not, because it can do a much better job of that. Okay? And then when it finds it, you highlight it, circle it, you put a color on it, you make it stand out, because otherwise it's just black and gray and white, not even white, black and gray. So now when it gets to the technician, he knows what to look at. He can still look at the whole thing, but now you have a much more detailed tool that'll go way beyond what the average person will ever see.
And I'm wondering, because right now everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And by the way, y'all, that is not going away. You might as well learn to embrace it, identify it, and work with it. But I'm wondering, because you're talking about the medical industry, how much AI are they using to, make those little colored buttons? Are they using, in some cases, AI to find those anomalies? And what are you seeing?
They're just starting. They could have done
Really?
that. They could have done that years ago. Let's even let's say 30 or 20, 25 years, 30 years ago.
You're kidding.
They did a brain scan. Well, the only thing the guy looked at the other end was a slice here, a slice here, a slice there, a slice there. Why don't you pan through the whole thing? All they needed was a graphics card from one of the computer games. That's all they needed
Graphic
to add to their
cards.
computer, a graphic card, because
Right.
the Intel Microsoft system, okay, graphics were never their game, okay. What you needed was a graphics card, like the guys with the joysticks playing the games had. That's all you needed.
Mm-hmm.
All you needed. It's just the slow kind of resistance to it, okay. You're not using it to replace the doctors or the technicians or anything. You're
And that's
using it to,
probably the resistance. They didn't want to be replaced. It would be my guess.
yeah, and they don't have time, and it can tell them where to look. Look at this, look at that. Okay, as opposed to just kind of look at a little bit here.
Well, and when my brother passed away, he was a double lung transplant patient. He lived 8 years with his new lungs, and
Wow.
his final year was just hell. He was just failing. He knew it. His lungs were failing. He had to get the COVID shot because he was always in the hospital. And that COVID shot actually was the one that finally did him in, punched holes in his lungs. But that's neither here nor there. But there were so many times that my skin would crawl, because they'd say, all right, well, we can't really see anything. They could have taken him to a local hospital, run everything there instead of loading him into a hospital and a fire truck and hauling him over to San Francisco all the time. And I caught myself wondering, because, I tend to be deeply suspicious of a lot of things, but I caught myself wondering, were they just running up the bill? Because he really was a $6 million man at the end of it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I just don't, I'm critical of a lot of this. And
yeah, so much of
right.
what they were doing didn't make sense. And they were over medicating him, in my opinion. I don't know this for fact, but he would get boxes of medication in the mail. And I'd say, who is prescribing? Oh, well, the team is, and they might have 3 or 4 or 5 people prescribing all the same stuff. I said, you people are nuts.
Yeah.
It just, there were so many ways that they could have kept better track of that. I could have kept better track of it with an Excel spreadsheet.
Asking about AI, the original, now back in the 70s, this is before I did the ARPANET thing, okay? I had a customer at MIT, so I roamed around the other halls of MIT looking for prospects, and I came across this one department, and on the door it said Department of Artificial Intelligence.
Whoa.
This was we're just before 75,
Wow.
okay? And then I went down the hall farther, 30, 40 yards, and there was another department. It's a Department of Real Intelligence.
Were they being sarcastic, or was that a real thing?
Yes. No, that's real. Yeah. Being real. Yeah. The computer guys are down there. These other guys were.
Oh God.
Slamming the other guys. Yeah, that's right. So way back then, there was the basic programming language, and it was a compiler that compiled as you did it rather than in a batch mode afterwards. And that was called artificial intelligence back then. Now, so by today's standards,
they were creating data. They were creating huge data sets.
Yeah. And they just called it that. Okay. But one of the areas AI is really, really going to help is where you have huge data sets. Since you brought up data sets, okay?
Right.
Large amount of data that people just can't go through, Okay, we got 3 million 3 million records here of people, and everybody has 20 different things we tested them for. Now let's find the anomalies and let's find the commonalities. That's where AI is really going to be useful.
It's useful now, but it's also being abused, as is anything. I mean, we're never not going to be abused by anything that pops up. But we need to exercise critical thinking. We need to do our homework. Don't just accept anything that pops up. So, oh, this is magic. Right. There's a lot of magic in the world. The internet is magic. It really is.
The internet's magic to people who don't understand the technology. That's right.
Right. But, just always my best advice to anybody listening to this is dig in and use your critical thinking skills before you jump off the cliff and go, woohoo, AI. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Seriously, don't do that. We've only got a couple more minutes, Gary. It's always so delightful talking with you because you have the most fascinating stories and, part of your history. But we're talking about the good. What are you seeing now that really concerns you that, I'm not going to call it bad, but you're looking at it going, I don't know about that.
The way AI could be used to abuse the political system.
And now you're talking my language.
Okay, that really, really concerns me. Okay, because now they can create these non-people to represent
deep fakes.
Yeah.
That's happening an awful lot. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I jump up. Well, I don't sleep a whole lot anyway. You know that, and I may have my iPad open and running at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not unusual. Or I may be in here at my desk at 3 o'clock in the morning. It just depends on what I feel like doing. And I'll see things that have me going, oh my God. But what are we going to do about it? Well, we have to be careful what we believe. So again, critical thinking skills. If you see something that you're like, go find other resources for it and then make up your mind. But don't just, whatever the legacy media is telling you, just discount it 100%. I do. Yeah. I don't listen to them ever.
Well, I'm the one in the crowd who always said, the king's got no clothes.
Yep. That's exactly right. It's
you got to say that when you see it.
Oh, yeah, you really do. Well, okay, so we talked about AI. We've talked a lot of things. What else would you like to share before I let you go? This has been fascinating. It's always fascinating having a conversation with you.
Well, I just think you got to kind of hold on to your hat and see what the new technology is really going to bring. Okay. There's always a lot of forecasts out there. It's going to do this, it's going to do this. And 90% of the time it misses the mark. That's something that surprises people.
Yeah, it does. And it's fun to watch in a creepy kind of a way. It's like, what did you boo-boo over there? Or, hey, good call. But again, critical thinking skills, which I think, or I'm observing again on my precious internet, that many of us are kind of lost that or never had it to begin with. You can develop it. Go find it. Critical thinking skills.
And
Gary,
if that's too technical for him, tell him to go watch the original Battlestar Galactica.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
The original one. There's a later one, but there's the original. The originals are the best. You know how it is. The first one.
Yeah.
The sequel is not as good, but it's good. But it's not as good as the original.
Is this a movie or these TV
shows?
No,
it was TV series out of Canada. It's out there. You can stream it.
Okay, I will do that. Well, listen, before I let you go, do you have any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're working on?
Every once in a while, I work on my notes of history, computer history. It's understandable by the average person. And every once in a while, I work on creating a chess set, but that I'm not. I need somebody who wants to play around with a 3D printer. Has one. Wants to do that kind of stuff.
That can't be difficult to find. Let's put out a call right now. Tell people what you're looking for and see if you can get some responses.
Yeah. So that and look forward to maybe I'll do I'll get invited to talk to a group, especially like it when it's one of the students. I get to talk to students group like the robot teams that I helped and would judge at the U.S. SAFE robot competition, which is terrific to watch those kids develop this stuff.
I think I've seen some of those on YouTube once in a while, robotics. I think they're fascinating. Well, Gary, we are about to run out of time. So where can people find you, or, just basically find you here or listen?
Well,
Is it safe that people can locate you?
Yeah, no problem at all. They just send you an email and I'll let you filter them. And Lon is the other person they can send an email to.
Lon Safco. Yes, that's our friend Lon Safco.
After being threatened and all that kind of stuff years ago, people said, "Why don't you have a Facebook? Why don't you?" And I said, "Because people were looking for me, and not in a good way."
You're the father of spam. What do you expect? I mean, that's not a term that's going to go away. I'm sorry.
I know. I wear it proudly.
You should. Well, listen, before I let you go, I want to thank you for joining me again. And for our audience, if you've enjoyed today's episode and you found our insights helpful and Gary's stories delightful as I did, please leave us a review and a rating on iTunes. Your feedback really does help me improve and reach more people on their own success journeys. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share your Partner in Success Radio with your friends and your colleagues. And thank you for tuning in. And we will catch you on the next one. Gary, thank you so much. And we will do a Zoom. I want to see your slides.
Okay. Well, thank you again for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure talking with you. Bye.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.